Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas, on Tuesday, May the 13th, and welcome to our commentary. Well, President Trump is in Saudi Arabia, and I saw a little bit of the speech that he gave today. Um, this is one of those meetings that I think has great promise. But I thought the most interesting part of the meeting so far, when he arrived in Saudi Arabia, the head of that country went to see him. They didn't do that for President Biden. I'm not exactly sure what that all means, but it is interesting. It's a bit reminiscent of when President Obama went to Cuba in 2015, 2016, I guess, and he wasn't received there by Raul Castro, at the time, the head of the country. So we'll see how it goes. I think so far there's good anticipation that this meeting is going to have some economic benefits, some investments that are coming this way. I sure hope so. I mean, as I said, I don't know exactly what's going to happen completely in this meeting. For having the president go to that region is always a good thing, I believe, for the United States. There is a little controversy that came up about an airplane or a 747 that apparently Qatar wants to gift to the United States. It's technically not a violation because they're not gifting it to President Trump as a personal gift. They're giving it, I guess, or gifting it to the Department of Defense or the U.S. Air Force, whatever it may be. My feeling is that this is the kind of thing that doesn't look good. And this is the kind of thing that I think President Trump should eliminate as soon as possible. Get this off the table so that we're not talking about it. Because frankly, we don't need an airplane from Qatar. I mean, that's just the bottom line. The problem is not with Qatar. The problem is with the manufacturer of the plane that apparently has not been able to make the plane on time. And it is true that the president of the United States is flying on a plane that I didn't realize it was 40 years old. I thought it was a little younger, if I may, or newer than that. I thought it was like 30 years old. But anyway, it's maybe time to get a new one. I don't dispute that. But why he doesn't have it and why the manufacturer has not produced it on time, that's the part that I think might require some conversation. But we shouldn't be accepting a plane from Qatar or any other country. Now, if that country wants to make a contribution to the United States or show its appreciation to the United States, that's fine. That's fine. They can do that. They can find other ways of doing that. Maybe they can just make a cash contribution of 400 million or whatever the cost of the airplane is to the U.S. Treasury. But I don't like the idea of giving a plane or gifting some country gifting a plane to the United States. I just don't think that looks good. And I believe that President Trump should, somehow skip that and simply say thanks, but no thanks, and move on to honestly more important things that are going to come up in this trip. I have a post over at the American Thinker today talking about Justice Sonia Sotomayor of the Supreme Court. As you probably have heard, Justice Sotomayor went to an ABA meeting. And while she was there, she made some remarks, even though she didn't mention President Trump directly by name. I think everybody knows what she's talking about. She almost sounded as if she was joining the resistance of the lawyers who are standing up for people. And everybody knows what she's talking about. She's a very dedicated liberal, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with Justice Sotomayor being a predictable liberal vote, just like there's nothing wrong with, let's say, Justice Thomas being a predictable conservative vote. That's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I do think that there is a problem when justices get into cheerleading or they make what can easily be interpreted as a political statement. That's not what they do. I mean, justices are supposed to be calling balls and strikes. They're supposed to be basically, pretending to be fair and listening to both sides. And when you get this far away from that, and it's clear to everybody who was there that she wants to be a part of the resistance, I think that's bad for the court. It's bad for her reputation. And, I wouldn't be surprised if in an upcoming case, the Trump administration says we want her disqualified because we don't think she can fairly look at our case. And frankly, they've got a pretty good case in making that after you see some of the remarks that she made. Again, she didn't talk about Trump directly, but it's obvious what side of the, let's say, what side of the resistance she's on. That's fairly obvious. So let's get away from that kind of thing. Let's get away from judges participating in any way, shape, or form in politics, because it doesn't do anybody any good. And it certainly does not do the Supreme Court any good. And right now, the Supreme Court is going to be involved in some very tough cases, and they need to have as good a reputation as they can possibly have. So, bad idea for Justice Sotomayor to get involved like that. I hope she can walk away from it and not do it again. I think many of us would appreciate that kind of distance, if you will, from the politics of the country. Well, the Democrats are having a little problem, and I have a post about this coming out tomorrow. The Democrats are having a little bit of a generational war. Remember the battle of the generations at one time? I guess it was in the 60s. The Democrats are having a problem with generations. And you have a younger generation that wants to replace the older generation. The younger members, the younger voters feel that the older ones are just too old and out of touch with reality, and they're not capable of, presenting an alternative to President Trump. That's more or less where this is coming from. I don't think it's a question of age. And I simply look at Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is older than President Trump. I think he was actually older than President Biden. It's not a question of age. I don't think it's a question of age. I think it's a question of ideas. And that's where the Democrats have problems right now. They have problems with ideas, not with age. Yes, they do have some older members. That's true. Nancy Pelosi is in her 80s. Many members of Congress are in their 80s. Yeah, that's true. President Biden was 82. But I don't think it's a question of age. I think it's a question of whether or not you come across, like you know what the heck you're doing, which was not the case with President Biden, unfortunately. And now we're learning more and more about President Biden. These books that are coming out, the latest one, apparently from Jack Tapper, I believe, the fellow at CNN. And in his book, they're saying that the doctor, now again, I haven't read the book, this is what I heard, but the doctor at the White House that pretty much told President Biden, the next time you fall, you might have to go in a wheelchair. Now, we knew that he was having trouble moving. That was obvious to anybody watching. You don't have to be a doctor to see that. But it's clear that things with President Biden were far worse than we were told they were. Somebody was covering it up for whatever reason. Now, many of the younger members want to see a change of leadership. They want to get rid of all those old guys and replace them with new fellows or new people. The problem is, and I'll just say it again, this is what my point is in the post coming out tomorrow. I don't think they have a problem because the leaders are old. I think they have a problem because their leaders have no ideas, and their ideas no longer work. For example, one of the younger leaders is Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez, the congresswoman from New York. She doesn't have an age problem, of course. She's in her 30s. Her problem is her ideas are from a different time, and they don't work, and most of the country rejects them. Even the Democrats in 2024 replaced President Biden with a younger person, Vice President Harris, and she didn't do it either. She wasn't able to convince people, and part of it was her unwillingness to answer questions about the issues of the country. So again, I don't think it's a matter of age. I can certainly understand that they want to bring in some new blood, but I don't think it's necessarily younger blood. I think what they need is some new ideas that are actually going to work in a society that has changed a great deal, in a society where I think more and more people question the role of government. I think more and more people look at government and they say, are we getting our money's worth? That's certainly the case with public education. I mean, you look at public education, it's failing in most places. I saw something that in the city of Chicago, an incredible number of kids are graduating who can't even read and write. So that's not a question of age. That's just a question of ideas. I mean, the Democrat Party has to try out new ideas. It would be great, for example, to see somebody in the Democrat Party, I don't care how old they are, come out and say, you know what? It would be nice if we demanded more from the teachers union and we demanded more results than simply allegiance to the Democrat Party. So it's a question of ideas. I don't think it's a question of age. And that's, so it's not so much that they're old. I just think that their ideas make absolutely no sense whatsoever. Well, we had some inflation numbers come out today. You may have seen that the inflation number, the 2.3 or 2.1, whatever it is, it's the lowest number since 2021. Now, I wouldn't jump to a lot of conclusions. Obviously, that's a good number for President Trump, but I wouldn't jump to a lot of conclusions. I still think you're going to see maybe some ups and downs. I want to give this thing a few more months before I start jumping to all kinds of conclusions about where the economy is. But clearly, the numbers are good. And the price of a lot of different things has come down. But I think the biggest factor, and I've said this many times before, I think the biggest factor is the cost of energy. Because when you have cheaper gasoline, that represents itself all across the board. Because everything has to be moved by some kind of fuel, whether it's diesel or whatever it is that we're moving things with. These trucks and airplanes and trains and all of that, they require fuel. So the cheaper the fuel, I think the more benefits to the consumer with respect to inflation. Let me leave you with a little birthday message. I want to say happy number 75 to Stevie Wonder, one of the real geniuses of rock and roll, pop music. I guess he came up in the Motown times. Yeah, I think he came up in Motown. Well, maybe it wasn't exactly Motown Records, but it was one of the subsidiaries of Motown. And he became quite a star. And my favorite album is Songs in the Key of Life that came out back in the 1970s. A great album and a great, great testimony to his musical ability, songwriting, arranging, as well as performing. He was always a fantastic performer. So happy number 75 to Stevie Wonder. Thank you for watching. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.